Hello, and welcome to Mega Blurbs, which is kind of counterintuitive. I didn't really think this out. Mega Blurbs! In the past, I've talked about genres, I've talked about the evolution of indie games, and I've talked about monkey, ooh ah ah. But today I'm kind of combining those things, not the monkeys, to talk about the evolution of genres and the games that most impact that development. So let's take a look at the games that define Metroidvanias, roguelikes, and survival games. Oh, and also this is the first episode in a series, and there will be many more genres to come. Video now. First off, we'll look at Metroidvanias. It would be fair to say that around 70% of all indie games to come out in the last 5 years have had Metroidvania-like inspired mechanics. How did you get that number? I made it up. First off, Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night form the base idea around Metroidvanias. These two games popularized the idea of utility-gated exploration while having massive interconnected worlds. So much of what we play today has DNA from these games, as their originality and creativity would go on to inspire tons of indie devs. And to go along with all that substance, these games also just had an incredible amount of style. It's hard to think of vampires without thinking of Castlevania, and it's hard to think of Nintendo without thinking of Metroid, which is an incredible feat. I don't know where indie games would be without these two, and as such, we should not understate their value. Next up, we have Ori and the Blind Forest. In a lot of senses, Ori and the Blind Forest isn't a traditional Metroidvania, but I think that's one of its best attributes. Ori and the Blind Forest is a friendly game. It's more linear than most in its genre, and it really tries to connect with the player. And connect it does, as I don't know if I ever would have gotten into Metroidvanias if it wouldn't have been for Ori. In a genre full of games that really rely on difficulty, Ori relies rather on story and a beautiful world to pull the player in. Because the one thing we know about Ori is that it has a great story. I hated that. The final Metroidvania is Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is the perfection of the Metroidvania genre. Its interlocking spaces unfold in incredible fashion, its mechanics unlock with perfect pace, leaving the player hungry for more, and its world is stunning and mysterious, with every turn immersing you deeper into your journey. The greatness of a Metroidvania comes from the joy of discovery, and the discoveries in Hollow Knight are seemingly endless, as they come both from gameplay and from world building. There are so many jaw-dropping moments to be had in its interconnected world, but I talked about that in this video, which you will now go watch. No, I don't think I will. Next, we look at the roguelike genre. Rogue, the namesake for roguelike, is a very old game and looks like this. And I really don't want to talk about that, to be honest. But I do want to talk about the games that got us to where we are in terms of roguelike popularity. First off, we have Spelunky and The Binding of Isaac. Spelunky and The Binding of Isaac were formative in making the roguelike genre a staple of indie games. Spelunky in 2008 showed just how hard but rewarding roguelikes could be as you battled through its many caverns and got restarted by its infuriating traps. And The Binding of Isaac would take Zelda-like inspiration while also adding a story that made sense of the roguelike genre's run-based nature. Both games, though, set down a base for what the genre would be known for: procedurally generated levels, punishing difficulty, and immense replayability. And I know Rogue had a lot of that stuff too, but the thing that you might not know is that I don't care.
Not even a little.
The next roguelike we'll look at is Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire took the run-based nature of the genre and combined it with playing a little game of cards. And it worked really well, as it draws you... It's me, it's me drawn on a card. That was the joke. To try to build up the perfect hand in order to take on its immense difficulty. Each run of Slay the Spire leaves you hungry. It leaves you feeling like you were just one lucky card pull away from overcoming its challenge. A lot of the roguelike class-based RPGs that we play now have tons of DNA from Slay the Spire. And once you've played it, it's easy to see why. And the last roguelike we'll talk about is Hades. Let me clarify one thing before I talk about Hades. Roguelike and roguelite are the same in my head. and also in the video. The isometric, skill-combining hack-and-slash combat of Hades is automatically enthralling as you deduct the best build to surmise from the parts you collect. The meeting and greeting of God serves both to build your strength and your interest in the world as you march to take on Hades and discover the truth about your mother. Hades is one of the few roguelikes where I've actually been heavily interested in seeing it through to the end, and all of that comes from its excellent story. The story is what makes Hades stand above the rest, and it's what makes it endlessly replayable, and it's the reason we're talking about it today. Finally, we have survival games. Survival games are having a bit of a renaissance right now, from Gaslamp Fantasy Survival to Pokemon with Guns Survival.
That sounds so stupid.
That's because it is. First, and maybe most importantly, Minecraft. You can't talk about the survival genre without talking about Minecraft, as it is by far the most influential game both in survival and in indie. Minecraft's blocky world was formed on the early test of survival, as you needed to farm to make food and mine and chop to make shelter. It's a very bare bones system, but what makes Minecraft great isn't this instilled desire to survive, but rather the desire to thrive, as the very simple tools it gives you can be used to build a myriad of excellent estates. This infinite in-game is what has made Minecraft last in perpetuity and ultimately become a staple of the survival genre. Next up, we have Rust. Rust's survival isn't about creativity, it isn't about gathering resources, and it isn't about precise shooting ability. It's about diplomacy and bludgeoning a man to death with a rock. As the core at the heart of Rust is navigating your opponents. If you take every fight in Rust, you're bound to lose everything you have, and that means each situation needs to be approached thoughtfully. It is the conceit of many survival games from DayZ to Ark, but the inefficiency of Rust's weaponry is actually what makes this diplomacy viable. Where in those games you would often just shoot someone from a distance and then loot their body, in Rust you aren't given that opportunity, as the weapons to do so are almost impossible to create, making Rust feel much more like a true survival game as you trade goods, coordinate, and communicate. The final game we'll talk about today, and the final survival game, is The Long Dark. The Long Dark is a frightening game. It is the personification of the cold and the horror found in its wilderness. The Long Dark is a game about making it through the night as it pushes you to cling to warmth. Each time you leave the comfort of your shelter to go search for food and water, it is a battle, not with animals, not with enemies, but with the environment. As such, The Long Dark is survival in its truest form. There is no winning, there is only existing. At the end of the day, genres only really exist to help us define the games that we love. These genres are all somewhat recent in popularity, and the games on today's list have helped give form to them and also given us some of the best experiences to be had in gaming. So whenever you're hopping into a new indie game, whether it be Metroidvania, Roguelike, or survival, be grateful for the path that these games laid ahead.
But we can't forget about this week's puppy patrons, which include Avon, Mr. Kairu, I Want an Apple, Bandwagon, Spider-Man on my new PS5, Johnny Hammerstick, and Nickel Simba. Thank you guys so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you, Benji.